Now that we have installed the various packages and defined configurations needed to run the code, let's move on to the next stage of the notebook, which is data preparation. So remember that the data we are working with is music, and we are specifically training on Bach data. So the format that we use for representing music in this use case is a piano roll. If you're not familiar with piano roll, think of it as a 2D image in which the x-axis represents the time and the y-axis represents the pitch value. So at every time step, you'd have one or more pitch values that has a non-zero value. So like you see here, music is now represented as an image, and we can exploit this fact that the music is represented like an image to apply various computer vision techniques that are often used on images for the music use case as well. We'll talk about that in more detail later. Now that we have seen how the music is represented as a piano roll, let's load the data into memory. So the first thing we're going to do is load the training data, which is stored as a NumPy array into the memory using the NumPy load method. So let's run through the cell, and we see that the size of the data, the shape of the array is 229, which represents the number of samples, into 32, which represents the number of time steps in each sample, into 128, which represents the number of possible pitches per time step, into 4 because each of our input tracks have 4 piano tracks in them. So each of the piano track is going to be one dimension. So let's try and visualize how these images look. So as you see here, we have a representation of 4 samples from our dataset represented as piano roll. Like you see here, they're like 2D images with the x-axis representing the time and the y-axis representing the pitch. Now that we have loaded the NumPy array into memory, let's convert them into a TensorFlow dataset object. TensorFlow is a very commonly used machine learning framework to run various deep learning models, and we're going to be using the same framework here to run the GAN use case as well. So in order to convert the NumPy array into a TensorFlow dataset, which can be fed into the TensorFlow model, we want to define a few parameters. First, the most important being batch size. So we divide our dataset into subsets called batches. A batch is a subset of data that is fed into the network once before the weights are updated. Often it is required to convert our data into different smaller batches because it is impossible to load the entire data into memory at once. So let's go ahead and execute these cells. So like you see here, the data shape still hasn't changed. It is the same as the NumPy array, except that it's changed into a TensorFlow dataset format. The size and shape of the tensor is still the same.